to trickle on in. Peace and blessings to you all. Welcome, welcome into the space. Good afternoon, family. Welcome and thank you for joining us for Liberating Justice, Funding Freedom, and Reclaiming Resources for Black-led justice work. I'm Kevin Beckford, and I'm with the Pretrial Justice Institute, and it's an honor to be here with you alongside our Executive Director, Gisela Marroquin, and our visionary colleague, Regina Alassane of Research Pro. We're here in the spirit of Black Philanthropy Month, not just to celebrate, but to interrogate, because too often philanthropy is framed as charity, as benevolence handed down. But today we center a different truth: philanthropy as strategy, as abolitionist practice, and as a tool for building safety rooted in care and self-determination. This conversation is urgent. Across the country, attacks on Black justice and criminal justice reform are intensifying. Black-led justice work remains underfunded and systemically excluded, even as our communities bear the brunt of policing and incarceration. And yet we know we are not powerless. We come from a long lineage of Black philanthropy, mutual aid, and collective care. Our ancestors pulled resources to build schools, defend freedom, and sustain movements. The legacy compels us to disrupt inequitable funding systems and redirect money and resources and narrative power towards our people. When we talk about resourcing Black-led justice work, we must remember this ain't nothing new. I won't be before you too long, but I'm gonna give a little history if that's all right, because Sankofa. So in 1787, Richard Allen and Absalom Jones founded the Free African Society, pooling dues to bury the dead and care for widows and orphans. United Order of Tents, led by formerly enslaved Black women, created systems of protection with sickness benefits, housing support, and scholarships when society denied us both dignity and safety. Maggie Leonard Walker mobilized the nickels and dimes of working families to build the St. Luke Penny Savings Bank, creating loans and home ownership opportunities. And in the 20th century, Black families across the South helped build thousands of Rosenwald schools for combining grants with their own land, labor, and small donations. The tradition fueled our justice movements. In 1898, W.E.B. Du Bois showed that Black survival and progress relied on self-help, uplift, and mutual aid. The through line is clear. Black philanthropy has never been denied. It has always been a thing, and we will continue it forward. So today, under the under the principles and the framework of disrupt, redistribute, rebuild, we will name the roots of narrative, of to name injustice, to share strategies that shift power and capital, and imagine what it looks like to cultivate a philanthropic ecosystem rooted in sustainability, equity, and Black self-determination. With that grounding, I'll now pass it to my colleague, Gisela Marroquin, who will help us locate ourselves in the moment and the stakes of this work.
Thank you, Kevin, and welcome everyone. Just so excited to be sharing this space. So I am Gisela Marroquin. I'm currently the Executive Director here at the Pretrial Justice Institute. and just appreciating this space and taking in the excitement and honor of sharing space with my in this very current moment where I think there's a lot of emotional heaviness for all of us. So I just encourage you to take a deep breath, let your shoulders drop, and lead into this family conversation we're about to have. And as Kevin said, I'll share a bit about myself to just also guide us in what we're going to unpack, because there is some pathway into it through my own experience. I am a Latina immigrant from Guatemala. I was raised in a multi-generational home in a barrio of Guatemala, where what I observed early on in my life was folks taking care of themselves and just experiencing joy being together, whether that's family, extended family, or neighbors in that area. So when my family moved into the United States, we came to New York. So while I also think of myself as Guatemalan, I'm also a New Yorker. And specifically, we ended up residing in the suburbs in Westchester. And so I grew up in a neighborhood where I had a lot of uh, I could see a lot of wealth around me and peers that had access to a global experience because they could travel. They knew what Ivy Leagues were early on in their lives. They had extracurricular activities and just things that I might not have access to, but things I could witness. And as a result, I just became very observant until I had the language to sort of unpack it. And as I pursued higher education, I took more than just my ability to just observe and really felt activated to do something about it. So I think it just was natural for me to land in human services and social justice work. So I identify myself in a professional space as an organizer first and foremost. And my other abilities and expertise has just been in the natural progression of the different spaces that I've been able to work in. I do credit a lot of young people, particularly what Black women who also welcomed me into sisterhood and taught me a lot about organizing, taught me a lot about, community and community building and the importance of always having that collective impact at the center of all of our goals. So I started as an organizer for the New York Civil Liberties Union, a multi-issue space, and found a lot of interest and I think just relevance in the moment that we were living in when I was working there around criminal justice. And continue to pursue policy work and advocacy, legislative advocacy, and seeing that how other folks didn't have access or felt that that particular activity, what others deem lobbying, was too complex, then I really wanted to give back and teach folks how to do that because I learned, through others. So ended up moving into training other people around legislative advocacy around New York State, developing those connections and really seeing that throughout the state there were also, there was a whole difference between how organized it could be done in New York City and, beyond its lack of resources too, there were even more lack of resources and limitations in upstate New York, and the similarities that it had to other towns and spaces in the United States. So it grew into an interest in resourcing and to thinking about outside the box of how we could do this work. Throughout my career, it was also very hard to get resources, even, resourcing myself and positions like mine as organizers, the pay equity was not there, and organizers were never seen as like middle management or sort of on a pathway of career growth. So all that to say, I think today we'll share a bit of those things that I think the three of us have experienced in different ways through our careers, and where I love that I'm here at the Pretrial Justice Institute is that we don't only think about our issue area, though it revolves around the criminal justice system. We also think about racial justice, and it has to be that way because of its history, because of its how it's embedded into all of the systems. And ultimately, our work, while it's in the pretrial space, essentially at that first, initial engagement of people into the system, the pathways and the intersections of how people get in there are all rooted in these racial inequities. And so, as we honor Black August and advocating and resistance and Black Philanthropy Month, that really is about us supporting each other. We thought this was really timely, and I'm so excited to get into the conversation. With you all. So, given the moment that we're in, I think a lot of us are experiencing some things, both in our work with funding, but also many of the limitations that we're seeing to policies and how our neighborhoods are run. So, we will start you all with a poll, just to give us some ideas of what we have in the room. And so, have you experienced or witnessed a loss of funding or seen resources disappear in your community during this current administration? So please click in your choices. Awesome, awesome. And this is great. So while you're all plugging in a bit of nervousness, I also forgot to mention that I did spend almost 6 years in the philanthropic space, and brought all of my organizing lens and racial equity framework into that work. And so, just excited to share that it's sort of a thing a space that, wasn't meant for me, but I am glad that I was in it. And so great to unpack that today. All right. So Yvonne, our colleague, is going to capture all of your answers. Yeah, what we suspected, right? And I think that that's why you are all in this space. So happy to have this reflection of what we have in the room and the energy that we'll have and the curiosity. And I'll pass it on to our colleague here, Regina.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Regina Allison, CEO of Research Pro, which is a prospect development consulting firm. I work with nonprofit leaders and frontline fundraisers to help them identify qualified prospects when they have multi-million-dollar fundraising campaigns. So my friends and colleagues like to call me Money. I see some friends have already commented some familiar names in the chat. They call me Money because I have identified billions and billions of dollars for nonprofits all across the United States. So I'm really excited to be here. I have a passion for Black philanthropy. Not only am I a fundraising consultant, I just so happen to have a passion for Black philanthropy. So I get really excited about the month of August. Today is also Give 828 Day. So this is like the Black Giving Day of Black Philanthropy Month. So an opportunity to really support and invest with our dollars and our advocacy. And so Kevin has done a great job of giving us some historical background. And I think, Ivana, if we could go to, I think we're at slide 5. Thank you. Thank you. So we talked about honoring our stories, and I always like to share this sort of backdrop. The first recognized like documentation and scholarly piece on Black philanthropy was created by W.E.B. Du Bois in 1898. And in that, he put forth a call to action. And so this is a call to action that I think we still have an opportunity to answer, that being to exercise unified strategic philanthropy. And then sharing this information today and doing this collaboration with the Pretrial Justice Institute seemed especially um, aligned, I'll say, in that he wrote this piece in response to the Ida B. Wells anti-lynching campaign, the Supreme Court's Plessy versus Ferguson ruling, as well as the grandfather clause. And so here we are again, facing an opportunity to put forth a call to action that is still very much relevant, that being the call for unified strategic philanthropy. And so if we could move on to continue with our next slide. Thank you. I think we'll skip a couple because we've done the thank you. And so we've done the poll and we know that we are seeing a loss. So I also like to have sort of a bit of a level set when we talk about disruption and disrupting philanthropy and disrupting this industry. So the level set here is that last year in 2024, $592.5 billion were donated in the United States. And so some of us may be familiar with this data. Comes from the Giving USA and it's part of the Giving USA report. So $592.5 billion, that's big business. That's a big amount of money. And what I also want to point out here is that this number, so Giving USA, they track this number and lots of other data points each year. And this number continues to grow. In 2008, when we had a recession, in 2018, 2019, when we entered a pandemic, 2020, 2021, when we were in the heart of it, and there was lots of chaos and lots of uncertainty, when we were unsure, would people still be charitable? Would people still be generous? They were. This number continues to grow. So I will share that in an effort to share some hope as well. While things look very grim and uncertain right now, those of us that have been in fundraising long enough have seen these types of lots of chaos and lots of uncertainty. When we were unsure, would people still be charitable? Would people still be generous? They were. This number continues. Can you hear like a recording of me? That was strange. I'll continue on. And so, what I will also say about this $592 billion is that the majority of this money is coming from individuals. So we have this notion, and it's not a notion because we receive dollars from corporations and foundations, right? But we do have a bit of the narrative. Let's disrupt the narrative. There's an assumption that corporations are sort of our savior, when in fact, corporations only make up 7% of the total giving pie. So about three-fourths, almost maybe a little more than 75% of the total giving pie is being controlled and donated by individuals. 60%, 66% of that comes directly from individuals. 19% of that 500 plus billion dollars comes from foundations. We know that some of that is family foundations. Some of that is also driven by individuals. And then we get into bequests. Those are gifts from individuals that have already passed on. So again, individuals. And I also want to disrupt the narrative that we assume that it's wealthy white people, when in fact, African Americans are the country's best donors and prospects. And so this kind of gets into how Kevin and I met. And so through the TEDx that I presented as part of TEDx KLB. And so really quickly, I'll share some of those sort of Black philanthropy facts. African Americans donate about $11 billion each year. We're significantly, this is the White House's words, we're significantly more likely to give than whites. 2/3 of African American households donate money. We're twice as likely to believe in the impact and that our gift makes a difference. 41% of African American donors report plans to increase their gifts, and 30% of African American donors give because of family tradition. That's generational giving. In 2018, the Giving Compass reported that African Americans are 4 times as likely to participate in social media to raise money. So we're the best donors now. We're the best donors in the next generation. We're the best donors. We're the best prospects. We're more likely to give. So I've spent the last 30 years, 20, almost 30 years, building multi-million dollar pipelines for organizations. So finding the best prospects, finding the best donors. And African Americans absolutely check the box for the best prospects and the best donors. So just like to share that, just kind of like disrupt this notion of what we think a philanthropist is and how philanthropy and money really does move within the industry of philanthropy with a capital P. Oh, and thanks for sharing the link to the TEDx. And I think I have another slide. Yes. And so, as we talk about African Americans being the best donors and the best prospects, another sort of notion, sort of just a given, something that we know and understand within the industry is that philanthropy often is driven by women. It's driven by the women within the community. So when we think about Black people, African Americans being the best donors and prospects, let's also think about Black women being the best donors and prospects. And I love that. I love that. And I talk about that often, as loudly and as I can, as loudly and as often as I can. Black women are the best prospects and the best donors. However, there's a challenge there because of that $592.5 billion, when we break that down dollar by dollar, the amount of money going to programs specifically for women and girls is 1.9% of every dollar. So basically 1.9 cent of every dollar that gets donated in the United States supports women and girls. And when we talk about the programming for that supports Black women and girls specifically, it's less than a penny. I'm challenged by that as a Black woman that has two Black daughters because I happen to believe that we're all worth more than a penny. And so that's something that I also have to call out when we talk about disruption and the ways that we can be intentional about our philanthropy. The inequities, continue. And the majority of Black-led nonprofits have budgets below 100,000. 61% of them have budgets below $100,000. How much impact are we really having with organizations that don't have more than $100,000 to spend within a year? And 43.5% of our organizations operate without paid full-time staff. So I think there's an opportunity to get really intentional about the $11 billion specifically among African Americans. And this is not even considering other BIPOC communities, but get really intentional about the way that our money is flowing. I think we're ready for the next slide. Yeah. So we have a poll question here. Yeah, that is a really disturbing data point when you think about like we're the best donors, we're the best prospects, but we're getting less than a penny. And then my mind immediately goes to how do I rectify that? Like, because I know Black women, we're smart, we're intelligent, we're creative, we're genius. We'll come up with the solutions, we'll create a new way. And so once we reveal that and kind of just again, disrupt the notions and the narratives, the solutions become pretty easy to identify. So I think we have a poll question to share.
And this question you can answer in the chat since it is an open-ended question.
Thank you. Thank you. What do you feel are the challenges to building opportunities in your communities, in your setting? It's easy for me to say, oh, we have all this potential. Oh, there's $592 billion out there that we can tap into. Oh, it seems so easy. Find all of these individuals to give, to support your organization. But we also like to really hear, like, what are the challenges that everyone is facing? The reimbursement model, I'm not familiar with that. Maybe that's just a
I think
term.
that refers to government funds or government grants having to reimburse for the service. And so nonprofits have to have the capital before and then get reimbursed. And it may take even years sometimes.
Thank you. And I'm more on I spend more time on the contributed revenue side of things.
Absolutely.
Trying to keep up with the chat here. Roberta says they don't have the resources to build a sustainable infrastructure.
Mm.
Mhm. And like, Roberta, let's do lunch. I have questions. Like,
I see Kimberly Cole says organizations are not collaborating or communicating. Hmm.
yeah, 1,000%. I see that happen a lot here in my local community. There are small, especially small Black-led, Black-serving organizations that all need the same community members, all need the same space, all need the same type of attention, but they don't share information. They just don't. And when I talk to them about like, can we let's bring all of your data together and figure out which who's willing to support all of you because those people are there, and it's always no, this is our data. We're not giving it up. We're not sharing it. So that I see that as an issue often. Someone else said the reimbursement model. Thank you for that.
Trudy and Elishiva, y'all preaching. Trudy says access and loud anti-justice voices and narratives. Yeah, we should do lunch and talk about it. Elishiva says black people bowing to whiteness and right now in Michigan holding on to millions. What's going on in Michigan? Sustainability, community engagement, organization. Mm.
Hmm.
I think this is an important point to raise and acknowledge from Dominique, and a few other folk have said this. Philanthropy has driven a wedge in community by creating competition. Yes.
It has. I see that happen. It almost feels intentional. So I've been around long enough to kind of see the patterns. And you do kind of have those pet organizations that receive the funding, the support, the attention. And there is that dynamic sometimes can create a sense of competition within the larger communities. Gatekeepers. Yeah. Yeah. This is really helpful. Thank you, everyone.
Should definitely continue to put some things in here. As we get to questions, we might come back to these. I think these are amazing and really on point. Tokenization for sure, I saw, and
Yeah.
the ability for organizations to build relationships with folks who have money and foundations. So I've seen that too.
The tokenization stands out for me. I have a colleague, his name is Mark Cardwell, and he talks about, I don't know if he's written about this, but there is some studies or there's some documentation of how the fact that arts and culture organizations across the country were are impacted by redlining in the same way. And so, how now the arts and culture, the leadership of some of these organizations, how they are experiencing tokenized leadership, and that it is part of the overall redlining strategy that continues, and how these arts and culture organizations are especially impacted. By redlining, and it shows up today again through the tokenization of leadership. So that's a very interesting one, and you can go deep, you can go down the rabbit hole with that. But I want to be mindful of our time. I could talk Black philanthropy all day, every day, and liberation and justice. I don't want to be mindful. Awesome. Okay. And I think the redistribute as we get into this. Kevin, are you leading this slide, I believe?
Yeah, so I'll just speak in quick from the perspective of an advocate. But we believe it's imperative rather to recognize that advocacy, organizing, and philanthropic giving and resource collecting and sharing go hand in hand. It all feeds each other, right? Um, and redistribution is about, shifting money. Yes, but it's also about shifting political and narrative capital so that resources can flow to grassroots justice work. There are groups like the Black Mamas Bailout, where communities raise money to feed mothers and caregivers, more of a collective giving model, right? Southern Poverty Fund that redistributes millions in pool donations directly to Black-led organizations in the South, which bypasses bureaucratic philanthropic by bureaucratic mainstream philanthropy, right? But through that collective uh, giving model, these grassroots groups are embracing an orientation to redistribution that is autonomous and unapologetic. Also, just want to name, the power of such advocacy and political or policy organizing. I'll just name an example in the criminal justice space. That's the Pretrial Fairness Act. For those of you who don't know, the Pretrial Fairness Act is one among very, 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 very few major legislative efforts that have ended cash bail at a state level. It's the only really, but it is the result of organizers, Black organizers, and Black legislators specifically coming together to leverage their positionality and power to advocate for the ending of cash bail. While also partnering with philanthropy to develop these community-based solutions like court reminders, projects, and transportation, right? So a big challenge in the court system is that a lot of folk don't have transportation to appear in court, or they may not be able to get childcare, right? These advocates, these Black organizers, Black advocates, and Black legislators, in their coming together to advocate for legislative change, also were simultaneously going to mainstream philanthropy and grassroots-led resource collecting efforts to support efforts like court reminders and transportation. It's also when we think about redistribution in philanthropy, it's imperative that we think of advocacy as a leverage, right? So looking at groups like the Movement for Black Lives, which explicitly called for foundations to divest from prisons and policing and to reinvest in communities while simultaneously drafting this very autonomous and unapologetic narrative of who they are as an organization, but more importantly, who we are as a people, right? The people that are, unfortunately, disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system. So, just wanted to lay those examples and those narratives as ways in which advocacy can orient to us redistributing
Yeah.
resources in
Yeah.
the mainstream.
I will add, Kev, to this part that if we want to also just, I guess, dismantle, disrupt, right, and then get to the redistribute part, we should understand also what we're calling right mainstream philanthropy, which doesn't include us many times. So in mainstream philanthropy, we have community foundations, you have private foundations, and you have corporate foundations. So corporate obviously relates to that space, and while there's a board, there's more also guiding, like the values are based on the business or the area that corporate entity works in. For private foundations, those are of a multitude of sizes, but those are most family foundations are in this space, and also foundations like Ford and others who have started as family foundations that have grown into larger entities, serving multiple issues and grant making in very large ways. And then you have community foundations, which is where I worked for almost 6 years. And then those foundations have to raise the funds that they give out. So they operate a little bit different in that sense that they play both a role as in grant giving as well as having to advocate ourselves, right, for why we serve the organizations and we invest in the organizations that we invest in. So it allowed me to also see what other possibilities are of including folks of color, of bringing in and opening the doors for more people that look like us into the philanthropic mainstream space. There was a whole cohort of people of color who was coming in when I joined philanthropy, or who had been sitting there and was we're bringing other folks into the space. And so you heard some terms that were aimed to sort of think about this redistribution part. One is participatory grant making. And that requires engaging community into the process of deciding who gets to get a grant when there are open RFPs, right? A request for proposals. I was happy to be able to work with colleagues and really think about the values and sort of the guide to ensure that that process wasn't really something that was like top down, but actually really integrated community into the process of participatory grant making. There is a resource database and an organization that actually got formed by Black folks in philanthropy across the globe around participatory grant making. So Ivana will place the link there, as well as sharing, which we'll share also after the webinar, a toolkit that my colleagues and I created around how to really engage a grants advisory committee, as an example of what is possible when you include community members and why. The other things I think I wanted to mention around redistribution were, mutual aid. Those are, things that folks do in community. It's like, I don't want anybody else involved. It's for us, by us kind of model. With it, susus or tandas, which are, also community-based, like informal loan systems. And those are historically, in a lot of our cultures, stemming from West Africa into the Caribbean and across, Latin America, which I experienced. And then we have cooperatives, there's a whole history around cooperatives after slavery because no one got the 40 acres and the mule. And so in order to become, successful and like thriving and survive, Black folks started, cooperatives, and also because they knew a lot about land and farming, it allowed for that to be a collective part for them to grow. And of those cooperatives and the model of cooperatives as owners, a collective ownership, we did see different cities emerge as like Black hubs and making their own money even more than some white communities, right? So that's a lot of the history of Tulsa, Oklahoma. You can trace back to all of those types of ideas. And lastly, I'll say community development financial institutions. So those are, when we hear credit unions, or CDFIs are, the acronym for this. These are meant to really entice the growth of community for investment in small businesses, or having access to funding that's, fair, with fair financing, right? So mortgages with fair financing. And this is more of a joint, private and public partnership to make it happen. And so some of those exist throughout the country with a lot of success and are sort of seen as alternative models, but obviously, should be more mainstream for us to know.
Awesome. I think in the interest of time, we're getting a nudge to move on.
Ooh. Ooh, yes. Let's go into rebuilding. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll let you go ahead, Regina. I know you have a few things, and then I'll add to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the rebuilding, there really is an opportunity for us to activate the things that are already available to us. We're already giving the money away. We have the dollars. We already have those resources, and we can activate that. There are also ways to activate the access that we have. So whether or not that's like our expertise in different areas, our networks, etc. And so I'll jump around on this list and get right into systems and technology because I get really excited about these two. And so these systems, when we talk about especially philanthropy, there is a science to fundraising. And I like to say the science of fundraising is for everyone. So there is an opportunity, especially I think it was Roberta that mentioned infrastructure. When we talk about building the infrastructure for a strong philanthropic operation. And when I talk about that, I'm bringing the lens of this is how we mobilize people through our philanthropic operation. We mobilize people through our advancement efforts. We mobilize resources. We deploy and activate resources through our advancement. So I really see philanthropy and advancement, professional fundraising, all of that as a tool for liberation. So leaning into the systems that we know work, you need to have a database. You need to collect data. You need to have automation tools in order to build relationships and maintain communications with people. Leaning into the technology. We're in a space now where, AI, it is what it is. There's no going back, and you lean into it or you get left behind. And many of us are oftentimes in Black communities, in communities of color. We tend to lag behind everyone else in adopting new technologies. And this really is an opportunity for us to lean into technology, lean into systems. It's the best practices that we know work to really activate our communities and mobilize our resources. Like we're in such a I don't want to say desperate, but it is such a keen need for us to mobilize and lean into what we know works. And I'll pause there and get off my bandwagon.
What I'll ask is also just, we should work together and lean on each other so that when we make an ask, we do it unapologetically. We also start to think about those who have access, as if we're like trying to borrow their money. It's your money. You're the expert. You're the one doing the work, right? So we have to like own it and go in there. And so in my time in philanthropy, you have no idea, sort of the interest meetings and folks, white folks, and how they get their funding, right? They're very direct. I need this. I want to start this idea, right? You either take it or not. So I think we just need that little bit of confidence. And, as we look at history, like certain things that were built by the Black community, it was that unapologetically building something. One of the examples are just a school that was built in DC for women, Nanny Helen Burroughs in the early 1900s, right, was like, I don't need white women to come and help me, but I need your money. If you're going to contribute, great, but you can't dictate how my school is run, who attends it. And that's like a historic thing that, again, unapologetically asking. I also think that we need to start collectively saying, we got to count all the cents of what it takes to do our work. So, philanthropy also gives a lot of program specific funding. We need to do general operating. That's a message that folks always tell philanthropy, I need general operating. And why? Because sometimes when we go somewhere, we take a client, right? If we're in the service field, we take a client, we pay for the cab, or, we go to court several times for a particular person or a case, to support and advocate. we need to get there. And so many of us, are driving our own cars, and nobody's going to pay for the fixing of our cars or the maintenance of our cars. And so you got to log, every time you make those things out of pocket. I also had grantee partners who, were working with youth and paying for breakfast out of pocket because they had young people coming in who had not had a meal, right? Teachers do this too, right? So we need to just be capturing those cents that add up, aside from unequal payment, right? And then I think the other things is how we build different resources and share with each other. So hotlines, we have a helpline through PJI, right, where we host a storage space for information. So if we want to, reach and exchange, like it lives there. There's, If When How is an organization around reproductive justice, and they have a legal hotline, right? The Center for Justice, Paralegal Pathways, those are folks who also went into an institution and said, I don't like, you may not like fund me for the operations, but I need your space, the leverage, the name, and also some of the faculty and access to things that my community has never had access to, and those are directly impacted folks coming home with an expertise. So yes, let's keep doing that.
Ivana, we can move to the whiteboard. Yes, let's do it.
There's
To
a,
that.
there's a question for Gisela that I would
Ah,
love to hear her answer to.
let's see. Let me see the question.
Can you see it in the Q&A?
Oh, thank you. Yes. So, my experience in philanthropy was in overseeing an initiative called the Justice Fund and Initiative. It's a collaborative fund. So that's also another model that philanthropy has built. The purpose of a collaborative fund for the philanthropic space is to come together to maximize dollars. So there could be different size foundations in this collaborative, and some will contribute more, others less, but ultimately the dollars pooled together will be able to maximize, the impact in a particular issue area or for a particular population. In this case, it was, with a focus on racial justice and gender justice in the criminal justice space. And so for me, coming in with the organizing lens and thinking through all of these things, we couldn't fund everybody who, deserved it. And so it was a hard thing, and making decisions had to have an advisory committee. So that was one of the things we created. Folks coming in, helping us make decisions, prioritizing the things that we could fund with the limited dollars that we had. Then the second part was utilizing our grantee partners to make recommendations of others they're partnering with so that another funding cycle could contribute to those organizations and help an ecosystem. And then thirdly, it was like the leadership development of the folks that we were funding. How do we ensure that they have healing spaces or access to healing? And so we utilized grantee partners from another portfolio to actually like present and give their work on healing justice to these folks, as well as access to like communications firms and other resources so that they can talk about narrative shift and talk about who's the spokesperson, who can talk to media. And so that was something that is different when you think about our collaborative fund and its purpose.
Awesome. So a lot of questions are coming in. See a lot of commentary continuing to flow. And for the sake of time, we just want to get a pulse of like where folk are at. How are you feeling? Like what thoughts are like germinating? Like what is excitement, anxiousness, willingness to collaborate? Drop it in the chat. And let's also just drop some questions in the chat. We want to spend some time engaging with you all, seeing if there's any way we can continue talking. Get
You
some one
prefer to
word.
come off mute and ask your question, please let me know. Just you can just raise your hand and I will. Yeah, okay, we have someone here. 1 second. All right, you're on.
Hello, my name is Alicia Johnson, and I am from Detroit, Michigan. I run Emergent Justice. We do justice reform, and particularly for young people. My question is, I'm finding myself in a few of these conversations. Just last week, I was in two conversations, much like this, where we were just like scheming, dreaming, thinking about ways in which we can take this moment as an opportunity instead of be demised by it. And I am truly wondering what is going to happen from these conversations, right? So like we're in these conversations, but at the end of the day, what is going to come out of this conversation today with me sitting here and listening to all of you? These are really great conversations, don't get me wrong. But what is going to be the end result? What's the action that's going to be taken?
I'm giving space for my colleagues to jump in, but I know what I want to see happen, what my end goal is that we answer that call to action to practice unified strategic philanthropy. What that looks like for me today on August 28th is Give 828. So it's Black Giving Day of Black Philanthropy Month. I don't really care how much money you give. There's an opportunity for us to invest, pick a Black organization in your community. It could be your own, but if you're a founder, be intentional and support a colleague. Make a donation today. Find some organization where you make a commitment to volunteer. This is no loss. There are plenty of options out there all across the country. That's today. And then beyond that, get very intentional about your own personal philanthropy plan. So maybe you're one of those people, oh, I spend $5 with the kids on the corner selling lemonade or water, etc. That's awesome. Continue to do that. Take a look at your personal salary, your personal revenue, and decide 10%. I'm giving 10% on purpose to an organization led by a Black woman that intentionally supports Black women and only supports things relevant to Black women and girls. That's another way that we can be intentional and take action beyond today. So I'm going to pause there and give an opportunity for others to share, but those are a couple of very key takeaways that I challenge each of us to activate as a result of this conversation.
Regina, you took one of my action items. Uh, So I'm gonna skip over that one, but I will just also say, share this conversation and continue being in kind of in dialogue with each other. Um, some of us have the blessing of starting to have these conversations, but they're happening in silos and not everybody's brought into them. So continue to just spread information, and to have conversation. I would also say collaboration is key now. Now more than ever, working together, whether it be campaigns, joint initiatives, engaging in advocacy campaigns, or applying for grants and opportunities with amongst a collective, or resource pooling and gathering and redistribution as a collective is paramount now. That would be and so I would say as a form of takeaway from this, I would love to, like, we've gathered all of you guys' emails and information. We definitely will stay in touch, and we definitely would love to share, like, if all are okay, like, who's in this virtual space right now, and identify those ways in which we continue conversations and potentially collaborate. But collaboration is key.
Yeah, and I think in these spaces is also an opportunity to network with each other and say like, hey, as you're entering either virtual or other in-person spaces, it's like I have space, because I work here. That's what I can contribute. And I know I've been a one-person shop as well, so I saw that in the chat. Um, for that kind of thing, you need a volunteer base, a volunteer task force that's actually like a well-oiled machine in some ways, right? And so at times we also lean into philanthropies like um, instruction for us to do it all, to measure up to others when we don't have the capacity, right? And again, to that competition thing. So if you need to take a pause so that you can create the volunteer work, right? And have everyone then designated to the things that will make your work happen and impact community, then that's what needs to happen. And so lean into somebody else who maybe can help you with that training, co-facilitating those things so that it can happen. An example of this is the New York Abortion Access Fund. They're actually a whole network throughout New York State that was volunteer run. Just a few years ago, they finally got an executive director, but everything was like, someone needs support. And it was like a whole group was activated on on a phone chain, on, a signal thing, text messaging, everything occurred because it was like, well, like if you volunteered, you signed up for this and this was your responsibility and there was an agreement and there was a training, all of that required onboarding. So it's very much, things that we need to do in this moment. Those collaborations also need strategic things and training, and we can't just do it haphazardly, and don't let philanthropy rush you in that urgency. If they want to invest in the thing, they have to wait until it looks and is to the capacity, right? Because they're not funding you for other employees. So you have to really push back in giving that reality.
I would just second that comment around strategic collaboration and also just knowing your power. I'll just
Yes.
briefly cite an example of a collaborative that formed in Tennessee. A bunch of education organizations who were like pitted to compete against each other for some money. They were like, no, because we're serving the same population. So what we're going to do is they went back to that funder and said, we are applying together because we are stronger together, right? And will be more advantageous to we're serving if we're working together. And that's exactly what happened. All three were funded as a collaborative. So know your power as well.
We have one more question, Ivana.
Yes, we do.
Can you hear me good enough? My name is Ed Anaya. I work for Minnesota Freedom Fund. I'm working advocacy organization over here. What we found difficult is with raising funds is connecting people to the importance of it. I really don't really think that people understand the gravity of what this bail system is here in Minnesota and how it is completely and utterly working against the poor. You know, we just in 2020, I think that everybody in the world saw what was happening on the ground when after George Floyd was murdered. So I think that it was an urgency there. So I think that's where we got this money from, and so fast, so quickly. But if you look at the organization, we turned that around very quickly. We became a professional organization. We do things, and we started doing things the right way. We stand in direct opposition to the state's laws, you know. So it is hard to get people to understand the gravity of that or even be interested in that fight. And I don't know if it's fear. I don't know if it's I really don't know what it is. But we are really struggling to connect with the people to help them understand that this bail system and the way everything is set up here in Minnesota is really set up against you. And we're trying to educate you on this and and bring you into the fold. And I think someone mentioned something like treat funding it like tithing, because you get pulled over in Minnesota just for a tag, and the price you pay for is ridiculous. You could lose your home, your kids, your car just by spending 60 to 90 days in jail, and then you eventually beat the case only simply because you didn't have any money. So I appreciate you guys giving me a lot of information on how we can frame trying to generate funds so we can continue the work that we do. Thank you very much. Oh, and if I had and the question is, what would you suggest for an organization who's, we're very unique. There's no one like us. So what would you suggest that we could do to maybe turn the tides or to help the community understand that this is important work to be done on their behalf? Thank you.
I'll just say and start. Let's talk. Let's really talk. This is what PJI. This is one of our bread and butter is having these narrative design conversations with local jurisdictions because that's really where the power is and the need to really shift the narratives that's at the local level. So I heard a couple people in the chat say, let's do a part two. Let's do a part two of this for sure, for certain perhaps, but then also we would love to just do a part two with any of you all who are having this challenge because there's so many groups, that are thinking about like how do we shift the narrative? At one point it was one thing, now it's something completely different. Yet powerful work is still happening in your communities and there's still a story to tell. So let's definitely wrap on that.
It also seems like we need more fundraisers of color in the field. So I'll shout out Cynthia, who's on the call. She helped design a program that was like, we know folks who are raising money are sometimes the executive directors of like one person shops, or folks who get the development associate or development or fundraiser, director. Are burnt out really easily because they don't have, an infrastructure and a community to lean on. So her program really is about like resource sharing, and those questions come up, on one-on-ones in the cohort about like, well, what did you say? How did you approach corporate? How did you, and those are important things to have for all of us in the field if we're going to be in these spaces. Close us out, Regina.
Awesome. So this was a lot of fun. I'm trying to like type in the comments and follow our conversation as well. This was a lot of fun. We definitely need to do a part two. I'm all for that. If you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to us. I think we have a closing slide with everyone's contact information. Um, yeah, we're over time. So thank you everyone for staying on for a few more minutes. I keep seeing people say yes here for part two. So
Hey.
let's do it. I'm for it. Let's
Yes.
do it. Thank you everyone for your participation. I hope that you continue to be empowered during the month of August on 8/28, as well as every day.
Take care, y'all.
And thank you, Regina, for answering our partnership call.
Yes.
So yes, this is how collaborations, start.
How it works.
Now you're committed to a second part,
Yes. Who knew?
I love
One
good
little LinkedIn
collaboration.
message.
So, and before we leave, I want to shout out Ivana for all of the
Yes,
behind
Ivana,
the
Yes.
thank
scenes and
you.
making this look
Thank you,
really
Ivana.
seamless. It's an
It
amazing
is.
team at PJI.
Oh,
I'm really
thank you, thank
grateful
you.
for the opportunity to share space with you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.
Wonderful to have you.
Bye, y'all.
Yes. Have a
Thank
great
you,
one,
everybody.
all.
Bye.
Take care.